In today's video, we're going to bring together earnings patterns along with seasonality patterns to build a simple scan to find some of these pre-earnings setups. The whole idea here is we have data associated with pre-earnings tendencies, and we can combine that data, backtest data, with seasonality patterns to see where we have overlaps where there's likely to be a move up into earnings. This is a bullish scan that we're going to be building, and you'll see by the end of this scan how we have one stock which stands out, which really meets all the criteria that we would be looking for. Now let's jump straight into ThinkOrSwim and start with building the scan. Inside of ThinkOrSwim, I've loaded in the automated monthly watch list scan that we wrote together not too long ago. If you don't already have this scan, I'll leave a link to download it in the description box below. It's a free scan which brings together the seasonality patterns. Now the only thing that we need to change in this code is the month that we're looking to scan for. Since we're currently in June, headed into July, I'll select month number 7 for July. With this particular seasonality scan, we're looking for all of the places in which July tends to close above where it opened 80% of the time, and on average, it tends to have a positive move. I'm using the weekly time frame here, so we have a little bit more data compared to the daily time frame. Now, the other two components of this scan that we had were related to the market pulse. Here, I can remove both of those studies and instead add in a new filter. We can call this a study filter. And instead of writing code, we can simply use the corporate actions earnings scan here to find any overlap with stocks that have earnings in, say, the next 20 bars. Now I'll run this scan, and let's run this in the S&P 500 so we have a smaller list to start off. Now in this list, we have quite a few candidates, 56 in total. If we sort by volume, we can see, starting with volume, what stands out at the top. You have Wells Fargo, you have Google, you have UNH, you have Visa, you have Carrier. There's lots of stocks that you can continue to dive deeper into. Some ways you can expedite this research is by using dashboard scripts. So for example, here I have our daily market pulse, which allows me to quickly see what the trend is as well for all of these stocks. So for example, if you wanted to find, in this case, we're looking for bullish seasonality. On our charts, we'll be looking for bullish pre-earnings. You might want to focus on places in which the trend is currently green, or maybe even gray for that slight positive in the stage of accumulation. Now the first green at the top, which stands out, is Google. So let's dive deeper into Google here. I'll come into our charts, and I've loaded in our pre-earnings indicator. For all Volatility Box members, the pre-earnings indicator is included for free with your Volatility Box membership. Now, to our pre-earnings indicator, I've seen that earnings for Google is on July 23rd, so I've set our days back to 16, and these are calendar days, to take us to 1 day prior to the current bar. Now that gives us some data on our charts that we can use to get a feel for how does Google tend to perform into earnings. So we see in this case, 16 trading bars prior to earnings, Google tends to rise into earnings about 90% of the time. And on average, that rise is 5.58%. This is using 5 years worth of data. In terms of implied volatility here, we see something similar with IV rising about 80% of the time into earnings. If we expand this from the daily 5-year to, say, the daily, let's give this 20 years worth of data instead, you should notice that we have a lot more data points, but the percentage stays relatively similar. 78% of the time, Google tends to rise into earnings, especially when you've given it this much time. So that gave me my bias, my bullish bias inside of Google. I know seasonality is telling us, if we load in the seasonal analysis indicator as well, that July tends to be a positive month for Google. If we load that in, we can see July, 73% of the time, Google tends to close above where it opened in July. And on average, that gain is 5.66%. Now, July has yet to come. We still have a few more days. And I'm looking for this volatility that we saw with Friday's activity to carry on. I drew some Fibonacci extensions here to try and extrapolate similar price movements. That gave us a few major clusters. We have 3 key levels that I would really say. You have that 178 level. you have that 177 level, and then you have the next cluster down here near 174.50. Now, if you bring in the market pulse line here as well, all with the idea of just give me one simple level, you have the zones between these two clusters which stand out. So I'm looking for Google to pull back to essentially the market pulse line, aggressive entry, call it near that 177.50 down to 177, and our lower Fibonacci levels near 174 to 175, call it. And I think those would be places in which you build a nice long side entry in Google, waiting for the pullback, capitalizing on this particular volatility, and trying to play the seasonality trends along with the earnings trends we saw earlier for an up move. So the whole idea here was bringing together our seasonality scan along with a simple earnings filter and piece that with our pre-earnings indicator to get some real data for each of these two metrics and find candidates in which you have both on your side. Seasonality along with earnings tendencies. I hope you found this video useful in learning how to build a very simple scan to help you find some of these pre-earnings setups. Take care everyone, good luck trading, and I'll see you in our next update.